Now, this video will talk about a little theory that I have over the years of why the U.S. ending Jim Crow saved the U.S. government trillions of dollars, and probably the white taxpayer trillions of dollars as well. Now, hear my theory out. Now, of course, segregation was based on the ruling that separate but equal. But of course, these pictures that I am showing you now show that it wasn't separate, it was definitely separate, but unequal. So not only blacks, according to this law, had the right to infrastructure investment by the U.S. government that was not being fulfilled. Of course, we had the whole ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education, which was about a little girl not having the funding enough to go to the black school that was at least 50 miles away. Now, if you check this out, this is a school comparative. This is the white school to the left, and this is the black school to the right. As you can see, the white schools have better chairs, while the black schools have one of those metal chairs that you have to like carry with yourself. Now, hear my theory out. Now, the U.S. ending Jim Crow saved the U.S. trillions because under the system of separate but equal, blacks could have sued for more investment in infrastructure throughout the whole United States, in which they were obligated through the whole idea of separate but equal. But since we ended Jim Crow, now the infrastructure just falls apart without the government obligated to invest in the infrastructure like they would have done if we sued them under the separate but equal law. So when you hear a white person say that, oh, white people ended segregation, please remind them that the whole ending of segregation caused downright the ending of the obligated payments on black infrastructure that the government would have had under the whole idea of separate but equal, or separate and unequal, as I like to think of it. Now, I have seen throughout my years white people brag that they ended segregation. Like I see a few conservative commentators talk about that. And that's like me being a rapist. And after I ejaculate and stop raping, then overall I say, I am the first person to stop rape, which you get me. I did stop rape, but I was the first person to cause rape. So if you get what I'm saying, you shouldn't brag about doing the right thing because, of course, it's the right thing to do. I mean, come on, man. And it was the necessary thing to do economically. And even Martin Luther King, after he fought for civil rights, he moved into a Chicago apartment because he saw that infrastructure rights is something also needed. In fact, here's a little picture of MLK in a housing projects in Chicago. Now, the North had a little bit of a different way of, the North had a little bit of a different way of segregation, as in they would segregate by housing and by neighborhoods. Unlike the South, like in the South, you had rich Southern neighborhoods, which was later on destroyed by white people, of course, but they had rich Southern neighborhoods, and they condensed the black population in these housing projects, which MLK complained about for years, and sadly, nobody heard him. So, of course, there still is segregation. It's just driven economically. The legacy of Black people in the 60s was the legacy of poverty that they left thanks to no economic employment throughout their generations. Furthermore, to emphasize my point, it was kind of hypocritical that America would use Black people as soldiers in wars and stuff like that. And they were fighting for freedom abroad but couldn't get it at home. Seemed a little bit hypocritical to me, especially since in the 1960s we were facing Russia and we were calling them communists and freedom haters. But they pointed out that America was oppressing its own minority of Black people who made up a significant amount of people in the 1960s. Furthermore, to add on to this point, was a little bit of the hypocrisy, as in World War II, America was seen as freedom fighters. And I seen articles that said that was trying to get Black people in baseball and showed dead soldiers and say brave enough or worthy enough to die for his country, but not to play baseball in the major leagues. So that was a focal point that I wanted to point out, the hypocrisy of calling your particular enemy a dictator, but showing you're ruling over this vast amount of people with no rights, and yet you're still asking these people to fight for you in war. So that's furthermore a point I just like to point out. And also, there was the whole thing about Hitler gathering people and separating people. There's differences and physiological differences and races and stuff like that. And we seen the atrocities that Hitler done in World War II, yet these same atrocities are being used against the Black race throughout America. And the Black race is fighting hard for America to spread democracy and freedom. And in capitalism was seen as the most freest economic state you can have. And democracy seen as the most freest economic state you can have overall. But not everybody is having it in America. So that's something I just wanted to point out. And add to that there was mass boycotts and sit downs, and businesses were not being purchased by the Black community who had major financial pull. And it really wrecked economies in the South that had majority Black cities. And do you know how many tons of millions of dollars that the government was losing yearly in revenue from companies losing the Black dollar and losing the liberal white dollar that was affected because of all this segregation? Not to mention that segregation, to illustrate a point, you had to build two places for people, and it was getting very hard. And if Blacks actually standed up and used the whole idea of separate but equal, then they would have to fix up the Black schools. And after we passed the whole civil rights law, they just let the Black schools be. There was no obligation by the government to actually fix these schools up. And to add to that was the idea that there was public places that were segregated and used the Black dollar to actually fix up the white properties. And I guess they used the white dollar to actually make the Black properties, but they made the Black properties inferior to the white properties. So there was massive unrest. And that's just a point I would like to say. So overall, ending segregation, ending Jim Crow, ending the whole idea of separate but equal, saved trillions of dollars for the US, and also save face because we were facing Russia and we were calling them the evil empire, and we were saying they were taking people's human rights away. But we, America, was doing all kinds of evil to our minority people, and that's all I have to say. Please like, subscribe. I wish you could share this video because I want this video to be out to everybody who needs to hear this, because too many people are giving credit to like white people for ending, segregation, yada, yada, yada. And I just want to get this out.